We describe the absolute rule of Louis XIV, the Sun King. 1642-43 saw the deaths of Richelieu, Louis XIII, and Marie de Medici. The doors closed on one era of French history and opened on a brand new phase, an era that saw the biggest growth of French absolutism under the new king, Louis XIV. Louis was 4 when his father died, giving him the crown. The repetitious story of a French boy king played out as Louis's Habsburg mother, Anne of Austria, acted as regent until he could come of age. Before he died, Cardinal Richelieu had appointed his immediate successor, Cardinal Mazarin, who was just as zealous about absolute French monarchy as Richelieu. Together, Anne and Mazarin worked to ensure that France would dominate the continent of Europe and the Catholic faith. They even intervened in the 30 Years' War peace treaty to ensure France would gain more power. At home, Anne and Mazarin worked to undermine and humiliate the nobility. The wars against Spain and the involvement in the 30 Years' War were costly, so the two began pushing a secret taxation on the noble class in the form of judicial appointments and out-of-Paris housing. Eventually, these tactics led to an uprising called the Fronde, which brought together members of the Second and Third Estate. The Second Estate was mad that their ancient right not to be taxed had been violated. The Third Estate was mad and increased taxes. The riots would eventually chase the royal family out of Paris and into hiding, something historians claim that Louis XIV never forgot. Upon his 13th birthday, Louis would become king. Mazarin and Louis worked to bring law and order back to France, placing it in the hands of the king and an increasingly large bureaucracy. They followed Richelieu's plans for creating an absolute monarchy, which included centralizing power decisions, collecting taxes, building a standing army of 300,000, letting bureaucrats write policy, granting the middle-class government jobs to tie them to the king and sever their loyalty to nobility. Louis was the product of Habsburg and Bourbon blood, therefore believed in his own divine right of rule. He adopted the sun symbol to not subtly remind the world that France revolved around him. Through his finance minister, Jean-Baptiste Colbert, they pushed out the last vestige of feudalism in France. They established protective tariffs and nationalized expansion of farms and industry. They encouraged the colonization of New France and pushed for protective mercantilist policies on the seas. Louis's France was so powerful that the Sun King was often quoted as saying, "I am the state." However, there was no legislative branch to check his reign, since the Estates General was no longer meeting. And without those checks, the wealth of France vanished to constant wars of expansion and Louis's life at Versailles. He wanted to keep the nobility busy and away from Paris, so he built the palace at Versailles 25 miles away from the city. With its mirrored halls, gold-lined rooms, and fine art, it was designed as a distraction. Nobility left Paris to jockey for favor in the massive gardens and fountain parks of the palace. They were treated to elaborate ceremonies like the levee. Louis gave them French ballet, art, and theater while respecting their ancient right not to pay taxes. Because of his lavish spending in global wars, he emptied the treasury, and his renewed attacks on the Huguenots, like burning churches, saw 100,000 talented Protestants leave France.